Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're heading back to New York City.
Ooh, New York.
Yeah, October 20th, 1854, to be exact.
Wow.
Forget those dusty history books. We've got something much better.
Oh, yeah.
A whole stack of New York Times snippets from that very day.
Interesting.
And I got to say, some of this stuff is pretty wild.
Really?
Yeah.
What kind of stuff are we talking about?
Well, I mean, you've got everything from, like, a shocking domestic violence case involving a ship captain.
Oh, wow.
Some real scandal there. And then, on a completely different note, we've got a price listing for 100 barrels of lime.
Lime, like the fruit.
Exactly. 100 barrels for just $30.
$30. Wow, that's a lot of lime.
Right. What are your initial thoughts just from these little glimpses?
Well, that lime price, it's more than just a fun fact. Think about it. 1854 New York City.
Yeah.
It was booming. Huge construction everywhere.
Makes sense.
And lime, crucial ingredient for mortar and plaster back then.
Oh, right.
So that price, it tells a story,
Yeah.
about the scale of the building boom.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe even hints at, what it cost to live in New York back then.
It's amazing how those tiny details can unlock so much, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And hey, speaking of fascinating details, we also have the story of a man, William Thompson.
William Thompson.
Yeah, this guy escapes slavery in Egypt.
Egypt.
And ends up in a Negro yard right here in New York.
Wow, that's incredible. So New York was a free state then, right?
It was, yeah.
But even so, for someone escaping slavery, things must have been incredibly tough.
Definitely. A lot of dangers and complexity still.
Yeah, no doubt. It also makes you think about New York back then. Such a diverse population.
Right.
And all those ongoing tensions, about race and freedom.
It's all there, hidden in these snippets. So where should we dive in first?
Well, why don't we start with transportation? The city in motion, literally.
I like it.
There's this article about the Third Avenue Railroad.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they were boasting about their 3 elevated railways.
3? That's a lot for back then.
Right. They called it the most direct route from City Hall to Yorkville.
That's pretty impressive, although the article also mentioned commuters complaining about the rails.
Oh, yeah. What was wrong with the rails?
Something about water damage, rotting ties.
So not exactly a smooth ride.
Probably not. Makes you think about rapid growth, maybe some corners cut on maintenance.
Definitely. Classic urban development challenge, right? Even today.
Totally.
It's that constant struggle to keep the infrastructure in step with how fast the population's growing.
Right, right.
And speaking of growth, there's this other snippet that mentions Virginia's population stats.
Oh, interesting. How does Virginia connect to New York?
Well, it was booming too, seeing that same population explosion.
It's like we're watching a city being born right in front of us.
Exactly. The birth pangs of a metropolis.
But expanding transportation, it wasn't just about convenience, was it?
No, not at all. Think about it. Reliable transportation.
Yeah.
People could suddenly live farther away from work.
Oh, I see.
So the rise of suburbs, that's tied to this.
Makes sense?
And that contributes to this population boom we're seeing.
Wow, it all connects.
It does. And it changes the whole social fabric of the city.
So the city's booming, it's expanding, and literally on the move.
It is.
What else are these snippets telling us about life back then?
Well, there's this notice from the city inspector.
What's he saying?
He's urging residents to report any nuisance or stagnant water.
Stagnant water? What's that got to do with anything?
Mosquitoes. Breeding grounds for disease.
Oh, right. Makes sense.
Gives us a peek into public health back then.
Yeah, they're fighting this whole public health battle without even really knowing what causes diseases.
Exactly. Germ theory. Not really a thing yet.
What do you think the average New Yorker understood about disease back then?
It's a good question. They didn't have the scientific knowledge we do now, obviously.
Right.
But they were starting to make the connection,
Between what?
between the environment and illness.
This notice, it suggests that. Growing awareness of sanitation.
Makes you wonder what kind of folk theories about disease were going around.
Oh, I bet there were some interesting ones. Speaking of which,
Yeah.
there's this snippet advertising a magnetic belt.
A magnetic belt.
Claims to cure all sorts of ailments.
Oh, come on.
But it's more than just a funny relic,
What do you mean?
It reflects the anxieties of the time,
Right.
desire for quick fixes,
Sure.
but it also shows us the rise of commerce, advertising.
Mm.
We see it with other ads too, for pianos, books, even lectures.
Lectures. Like what kind of lectures?
Well, there's one by Mrs. Diozzi
A Mrs. Yeah.
on the romance of Italian history.
A female lecturer in 1854.
Pretty cool, right?
That's breaking boundaries for sure.
It does make you think, evolving roles of women,
Yeah.
especially in intellectual public spheres.
Oh, it was still a pretty patriarchal time, right?
Oh, absolutely.
A woman giving history lectures, that must have been seen as pretty exceptional. Yeah, you're right.
I'd love to know more about those women,
Me too. Pushing those boundaries.
Right.
And these little snippets, they give us a starting point to explore all that.
Yeah, those bigger questions about social change.
Exactly.
Amazing how these little details can open up whole new avenues.
It is, and that's what I love about these deep dives. It's
Yeah.
about unearthing those hidden connections.
And getting curious about the past.
Totally.
All right, so we've talked transportation, public health, hints of changing social norms.
We have.
What else is jumping out at you from these snippets?
Well, there's this notice about the Democratic primary nominations in Brooklyn.
Politics.
Right, and it reminds us 1854 was a pretty charged year politically.
Oh, yeah.
The whole country was deeply divided over slavery
Of course.
and those local elections.
Yeah.
They often reflected that bigger national debate.
Yeah, you're right. Can't forget the bigger picture.
Absolutely.
And speaking of the bigger picture, we can't skip over that ship captain's domestic violence case.
Oh, right.
It actually names his wife, Ellen.
Ellen.
Yeah, and she was granted a divorce.
On what grounds?
Cruel and inhuman treatment.
Wow, so even back then, there were ways for women to escape abusive marriages.
It seems like it.
It's a good reminder, behind these historical snippets, there are real human stories.
Of struggle, resilience.
Exactly.
Speaking of resilience, I'm really eager to dig into William Thompson's story.
Oh, yeah, his escape from slavery in Egypt.
Imagine that, fleeing Egypt, ending up in a Negro yard in New York City.
It's incredible. It really speaks to how global both slavery and the fight for freedom were.
Okay, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
Let's take a moment and then we'll come back and unpack that story and more of these fascinating snippets from 1854.
Shit's good.
All right, we'll be right back. Okay, we're back and ready to dig into more of these incredible snippets from 1854 New York City.
I'm ready.
Before the break, we were about to explore William Thompson's story.
Oh, yeah, William Thompson.
Escaping slavery in Egypt.
What a story.
And finding himself in a Negro yard in New York.
It really highlights that global fight for freedom in the 19th century, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Imagine fleeing slavery in Egypt, seeking refuge in New York.
It's mind-blowing.
But the article mentions he was apprehended by authorities. What does that tell us about life for escaped slaves, even in a so-called free state?
It's complicated, right? Even in states where slavery was abolished,
Right.
escaped slaves still faced huge obstacles.
Like what?
Legal hurdles, social prejudice. It was a constant battle.
Thompson's case probably raised questions about the Fugitive Slave Act, too.
Oh, absolutely. That act required the return of escaped slaves no matter where they were found.
Even in a free state.
Even then.
It's heartbreaking to think that reaching a free state wasn't a guarantee of safety or freedom.
No, it wasn't.
Makes you wonder what happened to Thompson after his capture.
I know, right? These snippets give us a glimpse, but there are so many unanswered questions.
Like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Exactly. That's the challenge and the allure of historical research.
Trying to piece together those fragmented stories.
And understand those individual experiences within the bigger historical context.
Well said. Okay, let's shift gears for a moment.
Okay, sounds good.
We have this intriguing snippet about a hydro-oxygen microscope exhibition.
Ooh, a microscope. Tell me more.
What can you tell us about this contraption?
Oh, this was cutting-edge technology back then.
Really?
Imagine a microscope illuminated by this super bright light.
How bright are we talking?
Created by burning hydrogen and oxygen.
Wow.
Yeah. People could see the microscopic world in a way they never had before.
It's like the 19th century version of IMAX, but for the microscopic world.
Exactly. But it wasn't just about entertainment.
No.
This technology had a huge impact on science.
How so?
Think about it. Imagine seeing tiny organisms swimming in a water droplet for the first time.
Wow.
Or the intricate structure of a plant cell, never seen before.
That must have been mind-blowing.
It was like discovering a whole new universe.
Did this kind of microscopy have a lasting impact on scientific research?
Oh, absolutely. It advanced our understanding of cellular biology, microbiology, even medicine.
Really?
It paved the way for so many later discoveries and innovations.
It's incredible to think about the ripple effect of those early technological enhancements.
I know, right? It highlights that human drive to explore the unknown.
Whether it's outer space or the microscopic world hidden within a drop of water.
Exactly.
Speaking of exploring the unknown, these snippets also touch on westward expansion and politics.
Oh, right.
There's a mention of a lecture on the moral and political aspects of the Nebraska Bill.
Ah, yes, the Nebraska Bill, a major piece of legislation.
What was so significant about it?
Well, it was passed in 1854.
Oh.
And it essentially allowed residents of new territories to decide whether or not to allow slavery.
Wow, that's a big deal.
It was. It reignited those fierce debates about slavery's expansion.
So the country was on edge.
Definitely. The Nebraska Bill pushed the nation closer to the brink of civil war.
It's more than just a historical event, it's a powder keg.
It is.
What were the main arguments on both sides of this debate?
Well, on one side, you had those who believed in popular sovereignty.
Popular sovereignty.
Yeah, the idea that settlers should decide for themselves whether or not to permit slavery in their territories.
Right.
And on the other side, you had the abolitionists and anti-slavery advocates who saw this bill as a huge betrayal.
A betrayal of what?
Of the very principles of freedom. And they feared it would lead to a dangerous expansion of slavery.
It sounds like this debate really cut to the core of the nation's identity.
It did. What did it mean to be American? What did freedom truly mean?
Big questions.
Big questions indeed. And the debates surrounding the Nebraska Bill only deepened the divide between North and South.
Pushing the country closer to war.
Exactly. It also highlighted that ongoing struggle to define freedom and equality in a nation built on both liberty and slavery.
So much to unpack from just a single notice about a lecture.
I know, it's incredible. It shows how interconnected everything was.
Local events, national politics, even global movements like the fight against slavery.
It's all connected.
That's what makes studying history so fascinating.
It really is, those seemingly disparate threads weaving together to create this complex tapestry.
Okay, so we've covered transportation, public health, scientific discoveries,
We have.
political turmoil, and the global fight for freedom.
All in just a handful of snippets from a single day in 1854.
It's amazing how much history we've uncovered.
It speaks to the richness of even the most ordinary moments in history, doesn't it?
It does.
These snippets, they might seem mundane at first glance.
But they offer us this incredible window into the lives of people who lived over 150 years ago. I'm also struck by how relevant some of these themes still feel today.
Oh, absolutely. The debates about public health, technology, social justice.
Also all still happening.
It shows that even though the context changes, certain human concerns, those aspirations, they persist across generations.
You're right. Okay, we've got a few more snippets to explore.
Let's do it.
One that caught my eye was about a book titled The Chemistry of Common Life.
The chemistry of common life, huh?
Yeah, it promises to reveal the secrets of household economy.
Sounds intriguing.
It speaks to that growing interest in science, right? And how it applies to everyday life.
It's like the 19th century version of those life hack articles we see online.
Totally. I can just imagine it. 10 tips to improve your laundry using basic chemistry.
A horror. How to brew the perfect cup of coffee with scientific precision.
Exactly. But it's not just about practical tips, is it?
No, it's also about that desire to understand the world around us.
How things work.
Exactly. People have always been curious.
It's not just making chores easier. It's about empowering people with knowledge.
Absolutely.
Speaking of empowerment, there's a snippet about a treatment for female complaints.
Oh, tell me more.
It promises to restore health and bloom to suffering women.
What was the medical landscape like for women back then?
Well, it was a time when women's health was often misunderstood.
I can imagine.
Treatments like this one often took advantage of women's anxieties.
Right.
And offer these dubious cures for all sorts of ailments. It makes you appreciate how far we've come in understanding women's health.
Absolutely. And it reminds us to be critical of the information we encounter, even when it comes to our health.
Good point. So we've got science, self-improvement, even a bit of questionable medical advertising.
It's amazing how diverse these snippets are.
It really paints this vibrant picture of life in 1854.
It does. And there's still more to explore.
You're right. We haven't even touched on the snippets related to, we've covered so much already, but it feels like we've just scratched the surface.
I know, right? 1854 in New York City had so much going on.
We still have a few intriguing snippets left, hinting at the cultural scene.
Oh, the cultural scene. I love that.
This one caught my eye about a performance at Niblo's Garden.
Niblo's Garden.
Yeah, a famous entertainment venue in New York.
Oh, right. I've heard of it.
They were putting on a production of The Cataract of the Ganges.
The Cataract of the Ganges. What's that?
Apparently, a huge spectacle.
Like what?
Elaborate sets, dazzling costumes.
Wow.
And get this, live horses on stage.
Live horses on stage.
Yeah, what do you think? What does this say about New Yorkers' entertainment preferences?
Well, it definitely points to a love for the dramatic.
The visually spectacular.
Exactly. Remember, this was before movies, before television.
Right.
Live theater was the main event. And something like the Cataract of the Ganges.
Yeah.
With its exotic setting, all the spectacle, people would flock to that.
Seeking escape, adventure.
Totally. It's like the 19th century version of a blockbuster action film.
Imagine those audiences seeing our modern entertainment.
I know, right? Would they be amazed by special effects in movies?
Would they think it's all a bit too artificial?
Compared to the thrill of live horses on stage.
It's funny how our ideas about entertainment have changed.
Definitely. What's cutting edge and immersive, then, might seem quaint or even outdated now.
It's all relative to the cultural context.
Speaking of which, we have another snippet that sheds light on the religious landscape of 1854.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
A notice about a sermon at the Church of the Divine Unity,
Okay.
a Unitarian congregation.
Unitarians in the 1850s.
Yeah, known for their progressive views.
What did Unitarians believe? How did they fit into the bigger religious picture?
Well, they emphasized reason, morality,
Okay.
social justice.
Interesting.
They actually rejected the traditional Christian doctrine of the Trinity,
Oh, wow.
believing instead in the oneness of God.
So they were challenging traditional beliefs.
Absolutely. They were often seen as quite liberal, even radical, and they were active in a lot of social reform movements.
Like what?
Like abolitionism, for example.
So challenging traditional religious beliefs while also advocating for social change.
Exactly. They were at the forefront of both theological and social progress.
That's incredible.
And the presence in New York, it highlights the diversity of religious thought back then.
It's fascinating how these snippets reveal not just the events, but the ideas, the beliefs shaping society.
Absolutely. History is so much more than just facts and figures.
You're right. It's this complex web of ideas, beliefs, cultural values.
Well said.
Well, I think we've done a pretty good job piecing together that web with these snippets from 1854.
Me too.
From the everyday moments to the extraordinary events.
It's been a fascinating journey.
A captivating glimpse into New York City's past.
It's amazing how those seemingly random bits of information, when you put them all together, they reveal so much about the historical context.
It's like putting together a puzzle.
Each piece contributing to a bigger, more meaningful picture.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into 1854 New York City,
yeah.
What's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this exploration?
That's a good question.
What's the big takeaway?
I think it's this. Don't just focus on the big events, the famous people.
Go deeper.
Exactly. Look at the small details, the everyday moments, the stories of ordinary people.
Those are the things that bring history to life.
That's where you find the richness, the complexity of the past.
I couldn't agree more.
Who knows, maybe someday someone will be looking back at our lives.
Trying to figure out what life was like in the early 21st century.
I know, right? What will they find fascinating? What will perplex them?
Our obsession with social media, maybe?
Our reliance on technology?
Even our fashion choices could become historical curiosities.
It's a good reminder we're all part of this ongoing story.
Even our seemingly mundane actions can leave traces for future generations.
That's a great way to put it.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
It's flown by.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey back in time.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've enjoyed exploring 1854 New York City.
And remember, keep exploring, keep questioning.
Keep those historical imaginations firing.
History is all around us, waiting to be discovered.
Until next time.